Hello, everyone. Today we're covering Chapter 9, Reporting. So, first, let's talk about what is a report. Well, a report has a few different definitions, and the first one is a rumor. So, this could be common talk or an account spread by common talk, which is another way of saying a rumor, or it could refer to the quality of a person's reputation. So, a witness of good report is someone who has a good reputation. Now, we're also very familiar and probably a bit more familiar with referring to a report as in a news report. So, a detailed account or statement or multiple statements about a particular topic or an event. Now, when we talk about written reports, we also have written reports that happen in the courtroom. So, an encounter statement of a judicial opinion or decision, or a formal record of the proceedings of a meeting or a session. So, this could refer to a court stenographer who is taking a report, or it could refer to a person who who is taking notes for a business meeting or for a meeting of a board or something like that. Now, our last definition, or one of our last definitions, is a an explosive noise. So, when we talk about a report as in an explosive noise, this is when we're talking about a the sound following the firing of a gun or a bomb detonating. So, usually you of course see it first because sound travels more slowly, and then you hear the report afterward. And also, we talk about reports as in a verb. The definition there, of course, is to give an account or to make a record or a summary of something or to hold yourself accountable. So you're reportable for oneself. Now, we have a lot of different types of stories that fall under the category of a report or of reporting, but let's look at three main story categories. And most of the time, when you are looking at a report or deciding whether or not to include something, especially when we start talking specifically about news reporting, they fall under one of these three categories, either event coverage, features, or localizations. Now, this first one, event coverage, this has both planned and unplanned versions. And the planned one, these are ones where you're usually sending an announcement and you can think about the different foci elements, fame, oddity, conflict, immediacy, impact to determine whether or not it's something you want to cover if you're working on a story as a reporter. It can also help you if you work in public relations and you're trying to figure out how to make this more appealing for your intended audience. If you want them to attend that press announcement, or you want someone to go to a meeting or to another kind of news conference or something, then you do want to make sure that you highlight why this is important for the audience receiving it. Now, when we talk about unplanned events, these are more of those breaking news type of events where you're getting coverage about something that is happening right now and has a right now type of impact. And it's also going to often have a local impact, or if not local, at least in a fairly more specific impact to the audience receiving the message. So we can still have speeches or news conferences related to this topic. This would also include things like crime coverage, especially whenever we look at things that happen overnight, or when there's an of course unplanned event that you hear about from law enforcement agencies or from natural disaster or man-made disaster groups. So that would, of course, natural would be things like hurricanes. Whenever you have a an oil refinery explosion, or if you have a tanker that busts in the middle of the ocean, those would fall under more of that man-made category of disaster. And then, of course, we have travel-related coverage, and this can be a breaking news item. However, it does also have a little bit of that planned element to it, and I'll go over how all of these really you can essentially plan for unplanned events. But especially when we talk about travel and the busier times of year or even times of day when people are traveling, you can practically copy and paste and change a few items, and those stories are the same. Now, with that in mind, that does also mean that as a person discussing those issues, you might want to ask yourself, well, first of all, does this need to be discussed? And second, is there a better way for me to do this? Is there a way where I can maybe focus my storytelling in a different way that is less cliche, or has will have some other more immediate impact upon my audience? All right. So let's talk about preparing for events. Now, this can, again, these things can work for planned events as well as unplanned events. So, you want to review background information before you go somewhere to listen to someone give a speech or to listen to a meeting or what have you. You want to make sure that you are familiar with the topics that are on the agenda, that you know if someone is up for reelection, if there have been people protesting against something, then that's important to consider because it may lead to an unplanned event happening at the planned event. For example, if you have a protest that happens and wasn't necessarily broadcast ahead of time, so the protesting group didn't send out widely available information on social media or something. Maybe they had a little more of a spontaneous gathering at an event, then that could be lead to a slightly different angle than you originally planned. You also want to review any media releases that have gone out and any related stories. So try and look at story archives. And especially when we talk about planned events, you can see it's usually really easy to go back and say like, okay, last month they decided not to vote on this thing and they deferred it until this month. And you can ask people, why did you do that? Or what went into this idea, etc. So, whether we're talking about planned or unplanned events, you can prepare for them by writing a story shell. And this is a very quick way to handle these events. You look up the information. You can even use previously written stories if they're covering very similar material and see how they're structured and make sure that you go in and change the elements unique to this particular story. But after you change those parts of it, then you can include something like this. For example, if it's if there's a proposal on the ballot for the Lafayette City Parish monthly meeting, and the proposal is related to cleaning streets in Lafayette, like maybe they'll have the street sweeper come twice a month instead of once a month, then you can you can start your story already because you know this is an issue that's being voted on, and you can say a proposal to clean Lafayette streets and then passed or failed today by a vote of X to X. So you don't actually know the outcome going in, but you know it's going to be almost, you can almost guarantee it's going to be one of those two. Now, as I said, there are some other rules at play. Sometimes you can defer votes, so you can vote on it later, basically, and that might change what's happening. But for the most part, doing something like this will help you to quickly turn a story, especially if you have two or three events you're covering in one day. Often, what'll happen is maybe you were planning on covering this meeting, but then right after the meeting, you have to go cover a fire or you have to do something else. So you want to make sure that you have this structure written ahead of time. And even for things like fires or crime investigations, whether it's a burglary or if it's a shooting or what have you, they usually follow kind of the same structure whenever you're covering them. And you can refer to the archives at your institution if you're working in a particular, like at, let's say at a TV station or at a newspaper. You can go back in the archives and look at that kind of stuff too. So again, with our example, we say that the what's in the proposal, whether it passed or failed, what was the vote on it, and then maybe another detail regarding the legislation. So we say the legislation included a new tax to pay for the additional workers and equipment. And then you might include a quote from the winning side first, and then you could include a little more background, and then a quote from the losing side. So you don't even know who's going to win or lose again, but you know that you probably are going to highlight whoever won in this case. So if there's a particular a particular member of the organization who's been promoting this particular bill or has been fighting against it, and it fails, then the person who was fighting against it, you would put a quote from them in there, and then, go in and modify things a little bit, and it'll be ready to go on air. So while you're at the event, whatever the event is, you want to, of course, make sure that this is something that's important. Clearly, it either you or your news director or someone believes this is an important issue. So you want to go in with that idea in mind. Why is this story important? So look for some key elements and use your inverted pyramid to help you highlight them and support why those items are important. So use that background information, those interviews, or at least clips from people who spoke at a particular event. And also, you want to allow yourself to go outside the lines, looking at things. So if there's a protest, again, that would be something you want to highlight. Or maybe there are unexpected announcements that happen. So especially when we talk about corporate or government meetings, there there can be room for new business in there, and that new business may include something very important that now all of a sudden this is your new lead. So keep your eyes and ears open when you attend those kinds of events. So during and after the event, you want to conduct interviews, maybe ask some people who attended what they thought. That's a kind of person on the street interview. Or maybe you're able to have a Q&A with the people in charge and you can talk to them, or with a public information officer, again, if it's an event where one would be necessary. And make sure that you have, again, follow up contact information where you can ask people questions. And so get the email, phone number, that kind of stuff. And that way you can either follow up about this event or something that they have planned in the future. So you want to revise and rewrite your work. So look at your notes from attending either the press conference or the meeting or what have you, and double and triple check the facts that you have written down. So make sure that you either have a recording, or you have a or you have some of the documents or what have you, where you can go back and check things, make sure that you aren't misquoting someone, that you're including the correct names and titles, in addition to using the correct information, and that you understand what happened. So this especially comes into play when we get into politics and that kind of stuff. Sometimes you have to read through the docket a few times to understand what happened, because it's like when you have a bunch of negatives, when you have that double or triple negative issue, are they really voting for this to pass and you know, to say yes to having this new tax, or did they actually vote it down, but they did it in a roundabout way or something? And this would be the time when you're revising and rewriting, where you would have your story shell and you would take it out and make sure that everything you have in there still applies more or less, and fill in the blanks with your direct quotes, whether the bills passed or failed, who spoke, or if someone declined to comment, you can include that in there as well. Now, whenever you work in journalism, or if you're working in public relations for a politician or something like that, you need to become familiar with Robert's Rules of Order. Now, Robert's Rules of Order are a type of parliamentary procedure. They are used by governing bodies. If you were in a club in high school, you may have used Robert's Rules. Same thing if you're in a fraternity or sorority now. They usually have meeting guidelines based on these rules, if not these exact same ones. And these rules help you to maintain order within the meeting, to make sure that everything goes according to the proper procedure, that people are allowed to object when they need to object, or to vote for or against something, and that people are are allowed to share their thoughts in a relatively equal fashion. And one example of something that would happen in here, if you've watched a show before where they were having a meeting and someone seconded a motion, that's one of the things in Robert's rules. A motion has to be seconded before people can vote for or against it. And then also another one is whenever people are called to order, that is another part of the procedure. So when they're basically told to listen up and pay attention to what's happening in the meeting, and it signals the official start. All right, here's a question for you. How would you write a story shell for a labor strike? So, of course, you want to think about what's happening in the labor strike. You would probably talk to the two different party leaders. Usually, there are at least two in this type of situation. So, the people from the group that's striking and the people who own or run the company they're they're striking from. So, the one they're saying has unfair practices or what have you. And of course, the other people are saying, well, of course we don't. And so that's why they have a dispute. So you would include space for that information. And of course, this can help you when you're putting together who to interview. You can look at it and say like, okay, yeah, I should speak to or at least reach out to these groups and see who will give me a response about how they feel about what's happening or what they think needs to happen next. Okay, now our next section talks about feature writing. And you're probably familiar with features, whether or not you knew this was what they were called. This is the story where you have a particular trend that's covered in depth, or maybe it's about an interesting person or a place where they're profiling someone and talking about their life. You see this a lot more with the rise of documentaries and docudramas and stuff. So that's where we get more into features on screen. But you'll see a lot of these in news articles. This style of writing is also very similar to what you'll see in online writing when we talk about blogs and stuff where you're focusing very specifically on something, and it could be something that is localized, or it could be something that is a little more national or international in scope. And another kind of topic you might see in feature writing is something related to daily life. So, something that relates to your target audience in their like day to day things. So, not necessarily newsworthy, quote unquote, in the more traditional concept of news, but something that people still want to hear about. Now, when you're debating whether or not to write a feature story, you want to ask yourself what makes this story interesting? Why is it relevant? And more specifically, why is it relevant right now? So, you might need to modify your lead and in that way focus a little more on why this is relevant to my audience right now. Now, again, your focus could be an interesting person. Maybe there's a local celebrity who is opening their latest store and you want to highlight them and their business experience and stuff. Or maybe there's a broader concept, so a trend that you noticed and that is catching on in your area. And like maybe you noticed more people are wearing white Crocs lately, and you want to ask people about why are they wearing those Crocs. Another one that I've seen before is whenever there's something that comes up in a Discord group or on Facebook or somewhere, or one of those group apps where people are talking to each other and they're all kind either in the same geographic area or maybe in the same have the same demographics too. And like if there's a there was one story where people kept hitting this stop sign that was in a parking lot and over, and the stop sign ended up with a Facebook page, and the people in the area kept talking about it, and so someone wrote a profile on the stop sign in the Walmart parking lot, and it actually was written well. You know, they included person on the street interviews with people, and they did a little joke stand up with the stop sign too. So you have a lot of leeway when it comes to topics here. And sometimes there are, you know, we have that oddity element. There might be one particular instance of something where you want to highlight it happening, and you might include that is an unusual instance and that's why you're highlighting it. Or maybe it's the start of something that in other parts of the country became a trend later on. So you want to highlight it because of that potential to become a part of a bigger trend. And some other reasons would be because of anniversaries. So if it's the 25th anniversary of something, the 15th, the 10th, we usually do it in every 5 years or so after the first and second year. So you do, of course, you cover it when a major event happens the first year. Then you usually have the second anniversary or the first anniversary and maybe the second anniversary too. And then afterward you go like 5, 10, 15, 20, et cetera, for the anniversaries of this event or of this or of something else happening. And also, of course, trending concepts are another one that might be something interesting that's catching on with a particular group of people. It could be something seasonal, or, for example, maybe we're talking about back to school events. We could be talking about a new hunting season, or maybe it's the start of a particular holiday season. All of those can work for a feature profile or even a smaller, more traditional news story. But especially whenever you're looking for a larger story, you can go back in your archives and look at some of the other things people have written about it and then expand upon those ideas. So again, you can get ideas from competing stories. You don't have to be the first person to write about something for you to write a good story. You can see what other people have done and then build upon that idea. Say, well, I see that they covered X, but did they cover Y as well? And go through it that way. So see how you can make yours different, and if there's maybe an uncovered angle that you think should be brought to the forefront. All right. So I want you to think about one possible topic or topic category for a feature. Remember, we have so many things to choose from. You can look at holidays, anything really that's trending online. It could be those little boo boo things. Also, you could look at maybe fashion trends or music trends or something more serious if you notice a particular trend like there if you're looking at a doing more of investigative style feature, you can see why copper pipes are missing from different areas. Like usually it's from construction sites and stuff, but that kind of thing. Or if there's a lot of flooding happening in a particular town, you can do an investigative report and develop more of that type of feature. All right. So, again, specifically when we look at feature writing, there is a particular type of feature called the profile. And profiles are written usually about an interesting person or an interesting area or a something that you think really needs to be highlighted, and you want to discuss how this person came to be who they are, or how a building came to become a very admired building, or maybe it's something like if you, let's say, you wanted to talk about the quote unquote cursed buildings in an area, those restaurants where they just keep failing. And you could say, you could look into the history of that particular building or something like that. Now, when we talk about profile writing, profiles can include things like obituaries. So, if we're talking about profiles of people, especially obituaries, obituaries tend to be more sensitive, but you are still following essentially the same process, especially if you're writing a detailed one. And you can use archived footage of the deceased and include that in your work as well. And you'll see this a lot if you watch documentaries where they'll include that archival footage in there to give people watching a sense of this person when they were on camera. Now, some keys to profile writing. You want to interview lots of different people, not just the person you're profiling. And you also want to observe the person you're writing about, see how they move in their day-to-day life and how people interact with them. Now, it's very important to have at least one in-person interview if you're conducting a profile. And this usually includes some kind of ride along in that person's life. So this is different from a like riding in a police vehicle. That's normally what people refer to when they say ride along. In this case, we're looking at shadowing them essentially during the day, seeing what they're like at work, what they're like at home, how other people react to them, how do they react to other people. And you want to find out why they do certain things or why their office is decorated a certain way. For example, if you're talking to someone and you're discussing music and this person says that a certain song always makes them cry, then you might ask them what the significance of it is, if there is any. Usually if they're having a strong reaction, though, they're it's related to possibly a particular event in their life or a person. Sometimes too, if this was their mother's favorite song, for example, then it might make them feel nostalgic. So, profile framework, why is this person interesting? Basically, why are you writing about them? And this is something you want to ask before you get started. So, whenever you first start researching someone or deciding, okay, I want to profile this person, well, what about them makes them a good profile candidate? So, learn more about them, conduct some pre-interview research, and if you can, maybe ask people before you go to conduct your main interview, ask some other people in their life about them. You can also, of course, ask these people questions afterward as well. So maybe after you do that little ride along with someone, you can go back and ask their friends and family about a few more questions about them. And you want to look at information, of course, related to their day-to-day life and ask them questions relevant to their work or their lifestyle. See if they see what would be considered life-altering moments for this person. So maybe when they started working at a particular job and they realized that it was completely wrong for them, and that helped them to realize they needed to start doing something else. Or maybe there was a lot of people, if they had a loved one who passed away when they were younger, that can be a defining moment in their life as well. Or whenever someone's children are born, it's another one a lot of people mention. So, ask them about their life, and of course do that background research. If you start asking them about their children and they don't have any, and it's been mentioned before in other interviews that they don't have any, then they might be a bit annoyed and feel like you aren't taking it seriously. Now, again, for profile interviews, your primary interview and probably most of your footage would be with the person you're profiling, so they would be your main interviewee. However, you will also want to talk to other people in their life, whether it's people from their work or people who are their family, their friends. Maybe they have some frenemies in there who say, yeah, I don't really like them, but I respect their ability to build this business or something along those lines. And these people will help you to fill in the gaps in your profile and maybe come up with some additional questions you can ask your primary interviewee. And of course, you want to observe someone as you interview them, see how they're dressed, what are their mannerisms, how did they decorate their office, how do they include things in their home, what are they doing every day, how do they interact with the people around them. All those things can provide great details for your audience who is, they aren't able to be there with you during these interviews. So you want to collect that additional information. Like some people wear specific shirts whenever they have a big meeting, or maybe they have they walk around the same area for 3 miles every morning, or whatever it is that they have in their routine. All right, our last section is on localization. And localizations, this covers three different types of localizing. The first one is direct, the second is indirect, and the third is the microcosm. And all of them help you to make a broad topic relevant to your specific audience. And your target audience is usually someone who's in either your parish or county or your state. So you want to build a target audience profile of them. Think about their demographics, geographics, psychographics, their behaviors, and that can help you to hone in on how this larger issue affects them. So, direct localization, this is where we have that first degree direct connection with a target audience or with the interviewee, often both. So, let's say it's hurricane season and a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast, including Louisiana. Well, then you would interview people who were in the hurricane's area whenever it made landfall, and talk to them about the conditions. Was it very, was there a lot of rain? Did they have some tornadoes that spun off of it? Were they affected by flooding or anything like that? Ask them those kinds of questions, and then other people in your area who maybe weren't quite as affected will know a little more about what was going on, or they'll at least see how other people who were also affected are dealing with it. Now, indirect, this is where we have more of a second degree of involvement with a topic. So, let's say we're talking about an area that flooded. A lot of times this will happen in one of our neighboring states or a neighboring parish. And then you might interview someone who has a relative in that area that was impacted by flooding. And so they're taking in people that they know from the flooded area. And those people told them about their experiences over there. And now they're telling you. Now, our last one is the microcosm. And this is where we're looking more at national or international stories with a local impact. For example, if we were talking about the opioid crisis, and you might ask, how did or how does the opioid epidemic impact Acadiana? And so instead of focusing on someone with a relative in Tennessee who was impacted, or someone who maybe went to a treatment facility or something because of an addiction to pain pills, you might you might instead gather some additional, more specific data about what's happening in your area, and speak to professionals in your area about what's happening, and also maybe some other people who were impacted directly. So you might include a kind of a direct localization in there, but really we're showing on the smaller scale of that particular city or parish how this larger issue plays out. So, when you're deciding whether or not to localize something, you want to consider that topic's impact on your audience. Does it have a substantial level of involvement for them? Is it something where they would really feel concerned about it? For example, if there's a snowstorm up north, it it isn't as relatable for people who live down here, so where we have much less snow and a different type of cold that happens. So you want to consider, is this a good story to localize? And if it is, then make sure you're focusing on that particular local angle, looking at how the community is involved in it, and also to uh, again, if it's a kind of a national or international craze thing, is it something where it actually has a where there's a substantive level of story there? So instead of just covering the latest TikTok craze, for example, maybe you would talk about one that relates to people learning CPR, or you might have one that's about hurricane preparedness, something that your audience would actually find useful. And you can come up with silly local impact stories too, but it's something where you're kind of starting to tread a line with stories, and you want to make sure that you're adding to a good conversation for your audience and not just spreading rumors about something. So whenever you're looking at localizing, of course, people often reach out for person on the street interviews. And when you collect those types of audience reactions, you want to make sure you're interviewing people who are actually familiar with your topic. So don't ask your little brother about something that is, if he's 11, he isn't necessarily going to be familiar with a problem that's affecting national politics or something. You want to find someone who understands your topic and can give you a good response to it. So not only an understanding of the topic, but someone who wants to say more than just, yes, I agree, or no, I disagree, and try and get them to elaborate on their opinion. All right. So here's another question for you. What is one national story you might relate to Louisiana? All right. You have it in mind. So whenever you think about this story, think about, is it something that has direct involvement, indirect involvement, or something where you might see a microcosm of what's happening in these other places happening over here? And question number two, which foci or audience segmentation elements relate to event coverage, features, or localizations? So, whenever you think about this, remember with foci, we have fame, oddity, conflict, immediacy, and impact. So, fame, of course, is usually easiest to relate to profile writing, so features. Oddity can Oddity and conflict often go with event coverage. Um, Immediacy and impact can too, honestly. And immediacy and impact also relate very well to localizations. Audience segmentation, of course, if we consider geographic information, that relates kind of to everything, really, because you want to make sure that you're relating something to your audience that will be useful for them. And then, your demographics and psychographics and behaviors can help you to decide if something is relatable for your target audience. Okay, now we're moving on to beat reporting. So, what is beat reporting? Well, this is where you're breaking down news into different categories, and this helps journalists and broadcast members to focus their attention on a specific area. So, if you're a reporter, you will probably have a particular beat assigned to you. These are often related to counties or parishes, or if you're in a very large city area, maybe a specific region of the city and its outlying areas, that kind of stuff. Or it can also be related to other elements, and kind of like with the different basic story areas, there are also three types of beats. So we have thematic beats, geographic beats, and conceptual beats. Now, thematic beats are related to specific topics. This could be sports, local entertainment, higher education. It could be something else related to your particular area. For example, over here we have a lot of festivals. Maybe you're on the festival beat and you need to stay in touch with the people who are always making or revising festivals in Lafayette Parish or wherever it is that you're reporting. Which brings us to geographic beats. So, geographic beats focus specifically on a particular region. This could be a parish, a city, a state, a region of a country, even could be part of this. And often geographic beats will have an overlap with other categories, and usually with areas where we have a lot of local reporting, people will be divided more by geography. And then, let's say you're the Vermilion Parish reporter, you would cover not only the like some of the events for that area, but you would also attend town hall meetings and school board meetings and look for other announcements made by community leaders in that area as well. Now, the third type, conceptual beats, these lack specific, easily defined points, and these tend to be more focused on long term stories. So, data driven journalism falls into this category, as does investigative reporting. Multicultural issues is another one that is usually put under conceptual beats as well. And the main thing with conceptual beats is they're usually assigned reporters or producers who are going to work on them for a long time. and maybe produce several smaller stories in the meantime, but they might have something that they're working on for a few months before they publish the full story about it. All right. So, what are the three beat reporting categories? They are thematic, geographic, and conceptual. So, what do you do when you're starting a beat? Well, the first thing you do, of course, after you're hired is you want to talk to your supervisor or your predecessor, so the person who had the job before you. Sometimes when you have people with overlapping contracts, they'll still be there while you're to help train you before they move on to their new position. And a few questions you might ask are things like, are there any upcoming or annual events I should be aware of? Maybe they created a calendar for you to use, or are there any stories you're working on that you won't finish before you leave, and I need to follow up with these people and finish writing it? Or are there any other ideas you have or suggestions regarding handling this particular beat? And after you talk to your predecessor and talk to your boss, you want to find more background information. So you can look for previous editions of your newspaper, previous scripts written for your particular beat, or check your website, see if there are other blogs that were written about this topic. What did they cover? When did they cover it? How often did they rewrite this particular concept and publish it again? And then, of course, if you're working especially on either a geographic beat or a political beat, you want to review courthouse documents and become familiar with their filing system. How is everything put together over there? Who do you need to speak to whenever you need something? Let's say you're working on a story and you need the records for a particular school or something, then you want to know who to ask and where to find them. And finally, you want to review any internet or physical archives that includes at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, so all of those types of government branches, as well as anything from your particular organization. And you also want to review your writing deadlines. Are you expected to write an article every day? Will you need to maybe write several short stories during the week, but then you have one large investigative piece due per month? Or maybe you need to have a feature every month or every couple of weeks or something. And you want to make a calendar with a list of the daily or weekly sources that you should be checking, as well as your deadlines. So let's talk about developing information sources. And what does this mean? The short version is go out and meet people in your beat. Talk to people, see what they have to say. If you can, conduct in person introductions and find out who you should know in your area. See if maybe there are some people who've been overlooked before and they may be very grateful to hear from you and have a lot of new ideas related to your particular area. And you also, of course, want to build up those connections with people. You don't want to just go in, meet them one time, and then never talk to them again until you're on a deadline and you suddenly need an interview in the next couple of hours. So build that trust with them, build up those community connections, and it will help you in the long run. Same thing, even if you're working as a public relations person or an advertising person, you want to connect with the people who will want to work with you, people you might want as clients and that kind of thing too. And of course, remember, a few slides ago when we were talking about reviewing documents as well as who you should contact. Well, this is where you want to go and gather those documents. So go look for those annual budgets, find the meeting notes. If it's a government agency, they are required by law to provide most, if not all, of this information to the public. So that means you can go. You might need to do a little legwork to get some of it, but it is usually available to you either in a public library or at the courthouse. Or some groups also include meeting notes and uh, dockets and stuff online as well. And of course, you want to make a habit of conducting follow up work. That means reviewing your information, seeing who needs to be called, which emails do you need to send, checking websites and social media for any updates. Now, whenever you check social media, you should go directly to the page. Do not expect your social feed to populate with information from them, as I'm sure you have noticed since I know most of you have used social media fairly regularly at some point. The social media algorithms will often weed out the information that you actually subscribe to. So if you're waiting for it to show up in your regular feed, you probably won't see it. Some of them now, Instagram included, I noticed do have a following tab or something like that where it makes it a little easier to see posts from people you're following. But best thing is to look for those websites, make those phone calls, and to go directly to the social media sources when you're using those as well. And of course, connect the dots, look for stories that seem to be repeating themselves. Maybe there were multiple thefts in a particular area. Maybe there were, it's happened before where there were a rash of robberies, and the and there were a lot of gas station owners who were being robbed in a particular area because all of a sudden this group was going around and robbing them. Or maybe there's a mass teacher retirement because of problems with the school board or something else. So you can look into it and see why this is happening. And of course, don't be afraid to ask questions, take notes, and collect those source materials. So, who should you talk to when you first start reporting or when you first start a reporting beat? That's right, you should talk to your boss or your predecessor. All right. Well done, everybody. You have now completed the reporting chapter. All right. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in class.